But I want the world to know that somebody took a blessing from all of us. And we will get justice. You just don't know how strong this family is together, how much we done lost. This will not be the last time you hear from us. We will get justice for you, Shakiya and Kyron.
The young mother, just days away from giving birth, shot and killed early this morning.
That's right. Shakiya Pridgen's family says that she was just lying in bed with her two young children when those shots came through her window. We know that this happened in DeKalb County at the Woods at Pepper Tree apartment.
Shakiya, I love you, and I want you to know that we're gonna forever rep your name, and I want you to know that no matter what happens, we're gonna forever love you and take care of the kids. We're gonna take care of your kids.
The 16th of June, 2026. Just before sunrise, a quiet apartment complex in DeKalb County, Georgia, became the center of an investigation that would leave an entire family searching for answers. Inside one bedroom, a young mother who had spent the previous evening celebrating the arrival of her unborn son.
Open up them gifts. Hey, mama and daughter, get ready to do that thing. Go ahead, Zena. Go ahead, Kaya, mother and daughter. Hey, listen, we
Suddenly found herself at the center of a tragedy that investigators would soon describe as anything but random. As detectives began examining the scene, one question quickly emerged. Was this a chance act of violence, or had someone arrived knowing exactly where to go and exactly who they were looking for? That question would shape every step of the investigation that followed. Within hours, investigators were working to piece together a timeline. Why had this home been targeted? What had happened during the final hours before sunrise? And what evidence would eventually lead detectives to the man they accused? The answers would uncover far more than the events of a single morning. They would reveal a relationship, a series of decisions, and a legal history that would soon become impossible to ignore. For the family left behind, however, those questions were only one part of an unimaginable loss. They weren't simply trying to understand what had happened. They were trying to understand how a future they had been celebrating only hours earlier had been replaced by heartbreak, uncertainty, and a long search for justice. Before we continue, please know this documentary discusses a real homicide case involving domestic violence and the loss of an unborn child. While we will avoid graphic descriptions, some viewers may still find the subject matter emotionally difficult. If you're new here, welcome. And to everyone who has supported this channel through your subscriptions, thoughtful comments, likes, and shares, thank you. Your support helps us produce carefully researched, fact-based documentaries that keep victims' stories in the public conversation. If that's the kind of content you value, consider subscribing. And wherever you're watching from, let us know in the comments. We always enjoy hearing from our community around the world. To understand how investigators pieced together what happened that morning, we first have to go back to the woman whose life meant so much to the people around her, long before her name became part of a criminal investigation. Long before investigators began piecing together evidence, those closest to Shakiya Pridgen knew her simply as a devoted mother whose world revolved around her children and the family she was continuing to build. At 24 years old, she had entered a new chapter of life with optimism, balancing the demands of motherhood while looking ahead to the arrival of another child. Family members remembered Shakiya as someone who found joy in the everyday moments that often go unnoticed. She enjoyed spending time with loved ones, checking in on relatives, and creating memories with her children. Those who knew her described her as caring, protective, and deeply committed to the people she loved. No matter what challenges life brought, her focus rarely drifted far from providing a stable and loving home for her family. By the summer of 2026, that future seemed closer than ever. Shakiya was expecting a baby boy, a milestone that had filled her family with excitement. They had already chosen his name Kyron, and conversations had shifted toward the months ahead rather than the years behind. Loved ones spoke about welcoming him into a family that was already eager to meet him, and every passing week brought them closer to that moment. She was living in an apartment in DeKalb County, Georgia, where she shared her home with her two young daughters. It was a place where the routines of everyday family life continued as she prepared for the baby's arrival. Relatives frequently visited, offering encouragement and practical help as the due date approached. Those visits became opportunities to celebrate what everyone believed would be a joyful new beginning. Among the people who remained closest to Shakiya was her mother, Verdina Vina Scott, whose bond with her daughter was evident in every public statement she later gave. Other relatives, including her cousin Serenity Tate, also spoke about the excitement surrounding the growing family and the hopes they all shared for the future. To everyone around her, Shakiya's story appeared to be moving toward a hopeful new chapter. But as investigators would later learn, while her family was preparing to welcome new life, circumstances behind the scenes were quietly becoming far more complicated than they realized. As investigators began examining the people closest to Shakiya Pridgen, one relationship quickly became central to the case. According to court records, investigators and public statements from family members, attention turned to Devon Anthony, the man authorities later accused in connection with her death. At the time of these events, Anthony was 26 years old. Publicly available information indicates that Anthony and Shakiya had previously been in a relationship. Family members have consistently identified him as the father of the baby Shakiya was expecting, although authorities initially declined to publicly confirm that relationship as part of the active investigation. While relatively little has been released about when the two first met or how long they were together, what is clear from interviews and court filings is that their relationship had changed before June 2026. Family members described Anthony as Shakiya's former boyfriend, indicating that the relationship had ended before the events that brought national attention to the case. Even after the relationship ended, the pregnancy ensured their lives remained connected. With Shakiya only days away from giving birth, both families were approaching a moment that would permanently change their lives. Instead of focusing on the past, those closest to Shakiya were looking ahead to welcoming her son, believing the weeks before his birth would be filled with preparation rather than uncertainty. As detectives later reconstructed the timeline, they also examined the interactions between the former couple in the period leading up to June 16. Investigators routinely review communication records, witness statements, and digital evidence in cases like this to understand the nature of a relationship and determine whether any documented disputes, threats, or significant events occurred beforehand. However, at this stage of the case, authorities had not publicly released many of those investigative details, and it is important not to speculate beyond the evidence that has been made public. What family members did make clear was that they believed Shakiya had been focused on moving forward with her life. She had recently reached several personal milestones and was preparing for a future centered on her children. But as investigators would later discover, the days immediately before June 16 would become just as important as the morning itself. To understand why, they first had to reconstruct the final week leading up to that day, beginning with a celebration that brought family and friends together for what they believed was a joyful occasion. In the days leading up to June 16, there was little to suggest that Shakiya Pridgen's family was approaching anything other than an important milestone. Their attention was fixed on the arrival of her baby boy, Kyron, and every conversation seemed to revolve around welcoming the newest member of the family. Just one day before everything changed, relatives and friends came together to celebrate that occasion. Because not everyone could be there in person, the baby shower was held virtually, allowing loved ones from different places to take part. It was a moment filled with smiles, congratulations, and excitement as family members shared their anticipation for Kyron's arrival. According to those who participated, Shakiya appeared happy, engaged, and looking forward to meeting her son in the days ahead. There was nothing about the celebration that hinted at what would soon follow. Family members later recalled that the gathering left everyone feeling optimistic. They talked about the baby, offered words of encouragement, and celebrated the next chapter in Shakiya's life. Like many families preparing for a new arrival, their focus remained on the practical details that come with welcoming a newborn rather than any sense of impending danger. As the celebration ended, life returned to its normal routine. Shakiya went back to the apartment she shared with her two young daughters in DeKalb County. With her due date drawing closer, the evening became another quiet step toward what her family expected would be a joyful week. The excitement surrounding Kyron's arrival had not faded, it had only grown stronger. For investigators, however, that final evening would later become an important point on the timeline. Detectives would carefully reconstruct the hours between the baby shower and the following morning, working to establish who had contact with Shakiya, what occurred during those final hours, and how an ordinary family celebration came to be followed by an active homicide investigation. By the time the sun began to rise on June 16, that timeline was about to take a devastating and unexpected turn. In the days leading up to June 16, there was little to suggest that Shakiya Pridgen's family was approaching anything other than an important milestone. Their attention was fixed on the arrival of her baby boy Kyron, and every conversation seemed to revolve around welcoming the newest member of the family. Just one day before everything changed, relatives and friends came together to celebrate that occasion. Because not everyone could be there in person, the baby shower was held virtually, allowing loved ones from different places to take part. It was a moment filled with smiles, congratulations, and excitement as family members shared their anticipation for Kyron's arrival. According to those who participated, Shakiya appeared happy, engaged, and looking forward to meeting her son in the days ahead. There was nothing about the celebration that hinted at what would soon follow. Family members later recalled that the gathering left everyone feeling optimistic. They talked about the baby, offered words of encouragement, and celebrated the next chapter in Shakiya's life. Like many families preparing for a new arrival, their focus remained on the practical details that come with welcoming a newborn rather than any sense of impending danger. As the celebration ended, life returned to its normal routine. Shakiya went back to the apartment she shared with her two young daughters in DeKalb County. With her due date drawing closer, the evening became another quiet step toward what her family expected would be a joyful week. The excitement surrounding Kyron's arrival had not faded, it had only grown stronger. For investigators, however, that final evening would later become an important point on the timeline. Detectives would carefully reconstruct the hours between the baby shower and the following morning, working to establish who had contact with Shakiya, what occurred during those final hours, and how an ordinary family celebration came to be followed by an active homicide investigation. By the time the sun began to rise on June 16, that timeline was about to take a devastating and unexpected turn. By the morning of June 16, the focus had shifted from emergency response to a full-scale homicide investigation. Detectives from the DeKalb County Police Department began the painstaking process of determining exactly what had happened, knowing that every decision made during those first few hours could prove critical as the case moved forward. The apartment and the surrounding area were treated as an active crime scene. Investigators documented the residence, photographed evidence, and carefully examined the exterior of the building, where authorities believed the incident had originated. According to police, multiple rounds had been fired from outside the apartment through a bedroom window, making the physical evidence at and around the residence especially important to understanding how the attack unfolded. While forensic specialists processed the scene, detectives began reconstructing the timeline from the previous evening into the early morning hours. They worked to establish Shakiya's known movements, identify everyone who had been in contact with her, and determine whether anyone had seen suspicious activity near the apartment before the emergency call was placed. As with any major homicide investigation, officers conducted neighborhood canvasses, speaking with residents in hopes that someone had noticed a vehicle, an unfamiliar person, or anything else that might help explain what had occurred. Authorities have not publicly disclosed the full substance of those interviews, but witness information formed part of the early investigative effort. Investigators also began reviewing available digital evidence. Although law enforcement has not publicly released specific phone records, electronic communications, or surveillance footage connected to the case, detectives routinely seek that type of evidence to verify timelines, identify movements, and corroborate witness accounts. In this investigation, officials have not disclosed which digital records were obtained or how they contributed to the case, and any conclusions beyond the public record would be speculative. The investigation instead relied on evidence that detectives believed established probable cause under Georgia law. As evidence was collected and analyzed, investigators worked to determine whether the incident had been random or whether the victim had been deliberately targeted. That distinction became increasingly important because it shaped every subsequent investigative decision. Detectives compared physical evidence from the scene with witness information and other investigative leads, gradually narrowing the scope of the inquiry. Within a relatively short period, investigators announced that they had identified a suspect. Although authorities did not publicly describe every step that led to that determination, the evidence gathered during the initial investigation ultimately resulted in arrest warrants being issued for Devon Anthony, 26. According to investigators, he was charged with malice murder, feticide, multiple counts of aggravated assault, criminal damage to property, and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. Those charges reflected the conclusions investigators believed were supported by the evidence available at that stage of the case. Anthony, like every defendant, is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty in court. Once the warrants were issued, the investigation entered a new phase. Detectives were no longer trying to identify an unknown suspect. They were working with local, state, and federal partners to locate the man they believed was responsible. The search would not last long, but it would bring the case from the crime scene into the public spotlight, setting the stage for a rapidly developing manhunt and an arrest that would draw even greater attention to the investigation.